Aputure is one of the leading companies in film lighting these days, or at least one of the most interesting companies. I'm using their lights right now. A lot of other creators use their lights, and they're even used on like massive film productions. But what is Aputure? Who are they? A lot of these big companies, whether it be in filmmaking or in tech or something like that, they all have some sort of history or famous person or location attached to their brand, right? So, Apple has Steve Jobs and Cupertino. Sony has the PlayStation and all of their, massive amount of cameras and all that sort of stuff. Canon, Leica, Arri, all have big, long histories in filmmaking and photography and camera manufacturing and stuff like that. Of course, Aputure isn't as big as any one of those companies, but, since they're one of these newcomers that have really made a name for themselves in the filmmaking and creator business, and also because they're one of my personal favorite brands, I wanted to kind of deep dive and figure out who they are, where they come from, and kind of where they're headed. The story begins right here in Shenzhen, China in 2005. So odds are you've heard about Shenzhen before. It's one of the global centers for electronics development and manufacturing, and it's often called China's Silicon Valley. Today it's home to very many very well-known Chinese companies like Tencent, like BYD, Huawei, DJI, Tilta, and many, many, many more. In 2005 though, Shenzhen wasn't really the tech juggernaut that it is today, but it had already established itself as kind of a major hub for manufacturing and was one of the go-to places for high volume production and low prices. And there, a guy named Ian Xie, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Ian Xie was one of the many trying to kind of take advantage of the growing tech economy of Shenzhen. And he did that by creating an online marketplace where he sold various electronics and camera accessories. And right off the bat, he named his company Aputure. Bit of a side note, the name Aputure is formed by combining the words aperture and future. So I'm thinking, shouldn't it be pronounced Aputure? Aputure? No? So it's safe to say that Ian was at the right place at the right time to start a photography related business. And that's how it started off as. Only photography related, nothing video related, no video stuff at all. Which is, it's understandable because, at the time in 2005, videography hadn't really been democratized yet like photography had. I'll get to that later. Ian then started making his own products, and the focus of the company pretty quickly shifted towards that, manufacture of their own products, with them reopening their website in 2008 where they stated, Aputure is a rapidly growing photography accessory development and manufacturing company. Our mission is to deliver high quality, competitively priced products to make photography accessible and enjoyable to people around the world. I even found a product guide from them from early 2009 showcasing their products. And, like we see here, they're mainly focused on relatively simple products like remote shutters and then some battery grips and cables. But then on August 5th, 2011, they released a blog post revealing the Aputure Amaran LED video light. And they might not have known it at the time, but this one product marked a huge turning point for the company and sent them down the path that they're on today. But in order for me to kind of properly explain how they went from this to this, I need to explain two things to give proper context. First, I have to explain what an LED is. So LED stands for light emitting diode. And each diode or bulb like this is fairly simple. You pass a current through a layer of semiconductors and you can produce light. And almost all of the energy is converted into light, so very efficient. This is not the same thing as passing a current through a filament, like in a tungsten bulb, for example, because most of the energy is converted into heat and only a small part of the energy is converted into light. Very inefficient. And if you combine red, green, and blue LEDs, you can get white light. Boom, easy. Well, today it's easy. It wasn't really easy getting all of this to work in the first place. The first real LED was invented in 1962, but it was very red, very dim, and very expensive. So it didn't have any real practical use, but people kept trying, people kept experimenting, and by the time the 70s rolled around, we got cheap red, green, and yellow LEDs. But even though they weren't very bright, they were very cheap. So therefore, they were kind of mainly used for digital displays and still are. But in order for us to be able to make white light, or really any other color of light for that matter, we needed blue LEDs. And that would remain extremely difficult to do for very many years until 1993, when a proper blue LED was invented by a guy named Tsuji Nakamura. You can watch Veritasium's video on it, it's very good. So with red, green and blue LEDs, the floodgates just opened for white LEDs. And by the 2000s, we had fairly powerful white LEDs, and entering the 2010s, they got way more efficient and way more powerful and way more color accurate, making them very attractive to the filmmaking industry.
Lights, camera, action, huh, Scoop?
See, the filmmaking industry has historically relied on tungsten lights and HMI lights for the most part, and they're pretty cumbersome. They're kind of energy inefficient, they tend to be pretty hot, they have to be maintained. They're also a fixed color temperature, meaning you need to use more modifiers in order to control the light and modify the light properly. But LEDs offer the possibility of being more energy efficient, more controllable, and way more easy to use and maintain. The second thing that I want to mention is the democratization of filmmaking. So before the 2000s, before the 1990s, filmmaking was pretty reserved for those who had a proper budget, unlike photography. Early on, you could only shoot on film, which was prohibitively expensive and complicated. And then magnetic tapes came along in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and home video cameras along with them. And that made video creation, making short films, creating something more accessible to everyday people. But then again, the quality wasn't great. And more importantly, there was no internet for you to share what you make. Fast forward to the late 2000s and early 2010s, especially the early 2010s, cameras have gone digital. They have 1080p video capabilities, 4K video capabilities. People are making videos left and right and sharing them all over the internet. And they're doing so at an ever-increasing rate, even today. So at that time, in the early 2010s, creating and sharing videos, short films had never been so easy and accessible. And with that comes more demand for filmmaking products, videography products, photography products, any sort of product for this new brand of creators. Bringing us all the way back to Aputure. They answered this demand by creating lots of products for aspiring filmmakers and photographers, like the camera and video light, but also lots of other various products and various filmmaking equipment like focus wheels, rigs, shoulder mounts, monitors, microphones, all of that, while also continuing with their photography products as well. They were kind of just a general camera accessory brand, making sort of everything. But with this market continuously growing, if Aputure wanted to kind of keep up with demand and trends and just generally double down on their business, they would need to expand and grow the company. And if you want to grow a company like that, you know, within the filmmaking, content creation, photography niche, there's really only one place you can go. So in the early 2010s, Ian Xie, the founder and CEO of Aputure, he went to LA where he met with lots of filmmakers and color scientists, and there he met a guy named Ted Sim, a young filmmaker who kind of joined the early core Aputure team, which they call the A-Team, by the way. It's a very good name. And he kind of became the outward face of the company, from what I understand. He was in all of their early YouTube videos, and even in their current YouTube videos, he's very much kind of the face of the company, in my opinion. And from what I understand, their time and work in the US was mainly focused on the manufacture and development of LED lights. And apparently, they even produced a few lighting fixtures, LED lighting fixtures, for other production studios and companies. So I think it's kind of fair to say that they knew where the wind was blowing in terms of where the company was headed. Then in 2013, Ian Xie and Ted Sim, along with a few other business partners apparently, founded the Aputure that we know today. They were still a camera accessory brand, kind of a general camera accessory brand at that point, but it's pretty clear that their focus was mainly on their line of LED light panels, because by June 2013, they offered, I think, 7 different light panels on their website. But when looking at this, you might notice a distinct lack of lights like this. This right here is a COB light, or chip on board light. And while this is still an LED light, This type of COB is a very different beast to these types of light panels. These light panels are fundamentally very simple and very easy to design and easy to manufacture. You just have a lot of diodes, connect them together on a board, add a few controls, and boom, you have light. If you need more power, if you need less power, if you want a softer light, you can just add diodes or remove diodes. So it's very modular and again, easy to design and manufacture. But it comes with the downside that it's almost impossible to control the light that comes from these panels. You don't have any softboxes or Fresnels or spotlights. It just kind of spills everywhere and you have barn doors and that's basically it. COB lights, however, solve that problem. You can add all sorts of modifiers from softboxes to Fresnels to spotlights to whatever you want. However, these lights are way harder to design and manufacture. COB lights like this have to have either one big diode in the front or a very tight cluster of very powerful diodes, and they have to take up a very small footprint to be able to produce a very intense focused beam of light. And in order to do that, you have to have very powerful, very color accurate, and very efficient LEDs with good thermal management. And in the beginning of the 2010s, that tech wasn't really there for Aputure until 2016. In 2016, they released what I think is their most path-defining product, kind of like their iPhone, if you will. And that was the Aputure Lightstorm 120T, T for tungsten balanced. It was the first Aputure branded COB light. And like I said, I think this light marks the rise of the modern Aputure. And then in the beginning of 2017, they released the 120D, D for daylight, and followed that up later the same year with the 300D. They also kept pumping out various different light panels like the Amaran F7, the Amaran MX, the Amaran MW, the Amaran Tri-8, all while also still making various other videography products like monitors, focus controllers, and microphones. I didn't know this before I started writing this script, but Aputure apparently made the Deity shotgun microphone in 2017, and it apparently was popular enough that they spun Deity off into a separate brand almost immediately, which is still, alive and thriving today, so good on them. But all of this seems to me kind of that they were just taking anything and everything, throwing it at the wall, and seeing what sticks. Which is an expensive strategy, but it works. I mean, I can't really blame them. The market for photography products and video products, it was and is still evolving so fast, so there was no real way to know what would stick and what would sink. But after throwing a lot of stuff at the wall, they saw that kind of the only thing that was sticking for them was their lights. So in May 2019, they scrubbed everything off of their website except for their lights. No more rigs, no more remote shutters, no more lens adapters, monitors, microphones. All of that was finished, well, except for the Deity line, which is separate. And they were becoming more and more like the Aputure we know today. But here's the thing. Originally, back in 2019 and even earlier, Aputure had always had a core focus on independent creators, small filmmakers, small studios, not necessarily focusing too much on creating big, impressive fixtures for bigger budget productions and studios. But in 2019, kind of that all changed. They started doubling down more on their lights, of course, but they started creating bigger and more impressive fixtures like the 600D, the Nova P300C, and the P600C. Lights that were more geared toward bigger budget productions, bigger studios, and they kind of left the independent creator market kind of dry there for a bit. But they had a solution for that. They did something very interesting. So they killed off all of their Aputure Amaran light panels, like the little portable lights and whatever, and spun off the Amaran brand into a completely independent brand, specifically catered towards more independent creators. Basically just cheaper, simpler light fixtures, around or under 300 watts. And today they have an absolutely wild amount of lights available. So over the course of 20 years, Aputure went from a small online camera accessory store to one of the most impressive LED light manufacturers in the filmmaking business. Of course, they had and still have fierce competition in all sorts of companies, namely like, Nanolux and Nanolite. But Aputure and Amaran are my personal favorites, and I've been using it for a very long time, and I will probably continue to do so. And yeah, I had a lot of fun researching and writing this video essay. It's the first one I do, and hopefully I can do way more. Yeah, thank you for watching. Bye.